deck. If you want to go ahead, take it away.
All right, thank you, Kim, and thank you everyone who decided to join today and for taking time to answer some of those questions. That really helps me have a little bit of a better idea of what everyone wants to see and maybe some of the questions that might be going through your mind as we go through this session today. Now, when I spend time with customers like you and with other partners, actually, when we talk about SmartConnect, one of the things that I do is I encourage them to take some notes, to jot down what they're learning as they go through, to jot down questions, because what I find is that my customers tend to approach SmartConnect, approach integrations, maybe with 1 or 2 integration needs in mind, and what they find out is that SmartConnect can really be used across a lot of needs that they have. And so as they go through the session, they may even start thinking, oh, I can actually use it for this thing for my team and that thing. So take some notes, write some questions down. I'm here to make sure you get all of the information that you need to make a really good decision for your business on whether or not this would be a good fit. And for those of you that already own SmartConnect, to learn a little bit more about the tool that you already have to be able to leverage that functionality. So what I have prepared today so far is we're going to go through an overview of the product. We're going to talk about data sources and destinations and resources that are available to you. And then as Kim mentioned, we're going to spend the majority of our time together today on a demo. Now, I'm even going to ask you to participate with me as we're going through this session. So you can't doze off or start checking your phone or anything like that. You're going to have to participate with me here in just about a minute. And we're going to see your data actually flow from a web form that I'm going to have you fill out to GP. Okay, so we're going to see that in a minute. At the very end, as Kim mentioned, we'll go into some Q&A, and we can certainly talk pricing if you want to, but we'll spend more of our time on the demo and on the Q&A side to make sure you have all the information you need. Now, I have a few slides to share with you, but before I do, let's have a little fun. What I want you to do is I want you to open up a browser, and I want you to go to the address that you'll see there on the screen in bold. It's that second bullet point. It's reimagine.eonesolutions.com. So this is your participation with me. Go ahead and go to that site and then fill out the form with your name and your email address, and then you can pick the event level of general or VIP. Now this is just for the sake of the demo. I'm not using these names for anything else. So go ahead and put your name and email in there, and then I'll give it a couple minutes to make sure everyone finishes that. And then we'll move on. So we're going to see that data that you enter in being integrated. Now, if you're thinking, I am not comfortable entering my name and my email, then, put your favorite Disney character or favorite athlete or anything like that. Go ahead and do that. And once you actually fill out that information and you hit submit, that form is going to blank out for you. So don't worry about filling it out twice or anything. Once you hit submit and it's turns blank, you're all good to go. So I'm going to wait just about 30 seconds to a minute here. And like I said, what we're doing is we're actually going to use this data as our data source for today's session. All right. We'll give it a few more seconds here. Now let me just keep moving on. And if you're wrapping that up, go ahead and wrap up filling out that form. But as a reminder, we are here today to talk about SmartConnect, to talk about making the integration process, migration process, and really the process of generating new data a lot easier for you. Now, when we thought of SmartConnect back about 10 years ago, one of the things that we identified was the fact that integrations really shouldn't be so hard. Customers should be owning their integrations, or functional consultants that you work with from a partner perspective, they should be able to help you with your integrations versus having to hire in a developer to build out integrations and then having, upgrades that take forever and not being able to own the integration process. So that's why we created SmartConnect. We wanted to bring that solution closer to you as a customer. Now, this is, I know there's a lot of information on this slide, but this is something I share with all of my customers and all of my partners because it really helps give you an idea of the wide variety of ways that you can utilize SmartConnect. Remember in the beginning when I said, start jotting things down that you might think of, this is a good place to do that because if you look at the top box, you'll see a variety of different data sources that you can pull that data from. Maybe you want to start in a place like a SQL server or pulling from an Excel file or from a folder data source or maybe ODBC or via OLADB connection. Or perhaps you have a third party, maybe a third party that's a web-based solution and you want to connect to their web services. You can go ahead and do that. You can connect via text, XML, to an Access database, InfoPath, Extender, Excel, to CRM or to Dynamics 365, to Salesforce. So the sky's the limit in terms of where you can actually start, what that data source is that you're utilizing. Now moving to the next box to our trigger section, we're talking here about when you want these integrations to happen, they can happen. So you can do true real-time integrations, we can do change tracking, and I'll explain both of those a little bit later as we get into the mapping. You can certainly do manual integrations or external calls. Now you can even schedule out your integrations, which is something that Integration Manager doesn't provide for you. They don't give you that scheduling capability. You can certainly do a web service or an API call, so when you want that data to move, it can move for you. Now moving to the third box down to the transform section, this is really talking about making these integrations work for your specific business need. Now I've yet to meet two GP customers or two ERP or CRM customers that are using those solutions exactly the same way. And what that means is that your integrations need to work a little bit differently depending on what your business is doing and where you want to integrate that data. So what we've done is we've said we want to move SmartConnect from just essentially dumb data movement into something where that data movement also provides you with areas to do things like add in some .NET scripting or do some pre-run validations or add in translation tables or SQL lookups or calculated fields. So I'm going to point those areas out to you when we get into the mapping section itself, okay? So keep that in mind. Now moving down to the last box to our destination section, this is where we're talking about sending this data. In this case today, we're going to look at Dynamics GP and CRM. We are also going to write to Extender, but keep in mind you can certainly write to Dynamics 365 or a web service or Salesforce. You could write to a SQL table or a SQL server. You could export out to files or create an XML as well. So really, you should be able to take and draw a line from any of the data sources at the top to any of the destination options at the bottom, okay? Now there's probably a few questions rolling around in your mind here, so make sure to send those in or write them down so we can address them at the very end so we can talk about specific areas where you want to integrate from or you want to integrate to. Now a couple things to point out to you before we dive into the demo. Resources. I point these out early before you even see the product because I want you to be aware of the fact that we've put together a number of resources that allow you to have a step up with your integrations. We have about 13 different data entry templates, so if you want your users to do their data entry in Excel and then pass that into GP, you can do so, and I'll show you an example of that today. We also have GP and CRM mapping templates. So you don't have to reinvent the wheel. You get a starting point for your integrations. We've got the most common integrations out there with maps and with sample data sources, so you can see how those data sources, how you might set those up, and they really give you a starting point for your integrations. Now, I mentioned services down at the bottom because we work really closely with the BMI team. They're highly trained on SmartConnect, and I've seen a lot of success when customers work directly with their partners around services. Specifically, if you have a number of integrations that you want to set up, maybe you have a very tight timeline around those integrations, I would reach out to the BMI team to see if they have training, support, or project help that they can assist you with. I've been around SmartConnect since it was released, and I'm sure I'll say this at the very end as well. So been around it for about 9 or 10 years now, and I've seen really, really successful customers who are off to the races with their integrations. And those customers are the ones that leverage the expertise of their partners, leverage some training, and then they're able to set up very successful integrations. So keep that in mind as we review SmartConnect today. We can certainly, whether it's Kim and the BMI team or whether you want to speak with me, I can certainly make some recommendations to you around kind of what you would need beyond just the product as you get going on your integration solution. All right, that's enough with the slides. Let's go ahead and have a little fun together, and let's take a look at SmartConnect itself. So what I've done is I've just shared GP, and let's just review what we did in the beginning together, where we opened up the web form, that reimagine.eonesolutions.com, and we utilized that web form as our data source. So all we required was a name, an email address, and event level. Now, what happened was in the background, SmartConnect ran and created on the GP side of things, created invoices for everyone that entered information, created a customer card, and also wrote to Extender. And on the CRM side of things, we added to a marketing list, we created accounts, and we created contacts. So let's make sure that all just happened. So we're going to open up GP. And I'm actually going to open up a product called Smart View. It's not what we're demoing today, but it's just a little note here. This is another product of ours, just to say this is a much, much easier way for you to actually see your smart list. So we're looking at our list of invoices that were just created. So you should see your name listed there of the invoices that came in. So thank you everyone who participated in that. So we have these new invoices, and let's just see who to pick on today. Greg, I hope you don't mind. I'm just going to pick on you. And I'm just going to double click here. We're going to open up Greg's invoice. So we can see that since he registered for the event, I didn't happen to tell you guys on registration, I'm actually creating an invoice. You need to pay me $100 each to come to this party. We can fix that in a little bit, but we have this invoice that was just created. The other thing that we did is we created the customer card. So if I open up my customer maintenance window, I've got Greg created, and I didn't ask for an address. Now, we didn't even require that on the web form, and we didn't require it in order to create the customer card. But I want to make sure I update this address so it is sent back to CRM. So Greg, we'll just go ahead and say, I'm going to make up an address for you here, okay? We'll just say 456, we'll say Sunshine Lane, and I'm going to put you in Austin, Texas. That's actually where I'm based out of. And let's go ahead and select a quick header here. All right, so we've got your address that we've just added, and we'll hit save. And on save, we have a real-time integration that runs in the background and sends this customer updated information over to CRM. So we'll look at that in just a moment. So we said we wanted to create the invoice, we wanted to create the customer card, and the other thing we wanted to do is write to Extender. Now we have this Extender window that we've attached to our SOP transaction entry window. And if you're not familiar with Extender, Extender is a product of ours that allows you to create custom windows and applications without having to write code. So I wanted to capture some more information here, and I want to track who signed up as a VIP. So here I can see that Greg has decided to be a VIP, which is great. So I have this extra field selected, and I can report off that field. So I've written to a third-party field in GP as well. Okay, invoice, customer card, wrote to a third-party field. The other thing I said is we also want to write to CRM. Now let me just refresh my CRM instance here. And we want to add to a marketing list. That's what SmartConnect is doing for us. So let's just open up the marketing list. And the other thing we want to do is we wanted to make sure that contacts and accounts were created. So if you take a look right in the middle at our list of members, you should see your name listed there. And Greg, since we looked at your invoice before, we'll go ahead and look at your contact card. So Greg was created as a contact in CRM, and he was also created as an account. And we just did the first and the last name for that and created the account in CRM. So if we look at the account, now we can see not only is Greg created as an account in CRM, but we've also tied his GP account number to the CRM account number. We have this relationship type set to customer, so I know if I make any changes on the CRM side, since I have the relationship type set to customer, it's going to pass any of those changes right back to GP and update that GP customer card. Now, if you look down at the very bottom left-hand side, you can see that I have that address we just added of 456 Sunshine Lane in Austin, Texas. So that made it in the real-time integration. So it was based on a GP real-time trigger, came back over to CRM. But I can see here, you know what, we're missing Greg's phone number. So let's give him a phone number. And let's just add that, and we'll hit save down at the bottom right. And we have a real-time map that runs back to GP, and it will give him that 789-789-7878 number. And we'll check that in a moment. Okay? So from just a little bit of information we captured on a web form, we were able to create transactions and cards in GP to write to a third party, and on the CRM side, write to a marketing list and create accounts and contacts. Now, if you think about that, I'm sure all of you on the call have websites where maybe you're even capturing really simple things like contact us information. Maybe you can start passing that to your CRM system, or you can, maybe you have a shop, an e-commerce that you're using where you want to pass transactions over to GP and create paid invoices after they come in from your website. You know, start thinking about some of those things that you can actually do with SmartConnect. Now, before we go back into GP just to check on that phone number, I want to show you one more thing. I have a feeling that a lot of you on the call spend some time in Excel. If you're like all of us in the GP world, Excel is happens to be one of our favorite things. So what I've done is I've actually just pulled up the invoices that we've just created, but in this case, I pulled them up utilizing a report that I created with Excel Report Builder. So I'm pulling that refreshable data from GP. These are all my unposted invoices. And let's say I'm a user that maybe doesn't need access to GP, but maybe I want them to make a few changes here and then pass the changes back to GP to update those unposted invoices. So I see a list of names and the amount here. Let's do some changes here. I'm going to say, you know what, I didn't tell you guys about that charge for the party, so it's going to be a really good party, so I'm going to foot the bill for that. And Greg, we've been picking on you, so we'll give you a discount. And let's give a few more discounts. We'll just kind of pick randomly 10, 10. We'll do a couple 20s and 30s and 40s, and how about 50 here? And you know what, I see a few of you decided that you didn't want to be a VIP status, but I really think everyone deserves to be a VIP for this party. And the other thing I'm seeing is we've got a couple Kims in here, so we're going to change Kim Peterson. We'll just change it to Kim Smith. And you know what, we also have two John Morrison, so we're going to change John, we'll say John Anderson instead. I know I'm picking really creative names here, but we'll go ahead and do that. And that should be enough. We'll make those changes here. And now what we're going to do is we're going to move up to the top of the screen to our eOne Solutions tab, and I'm going to select the Run Map option. Now, what we're using here is our Excel add-in, which you can download. It's actually a separate download from SmartConnect, but there's not an additional price for it at all. But what you can do here is you can actually have your users run the integration right from within Excel if you would like them to. And when they hit this Run Map button, what happens is that we're passing this data back to GP utilizing our SmartConnect web services, and we get a message saying the run was successful. Okay, so we made all those changes. Now let's just jump right back into GP, and I'll make things easy and we can just view this in Smart View. I'm going to refresh this data. And let's take a look at these changes that just came in. So here I am at the top, unfortunately, with that $10,000 invoice. And we've got everyone else with those changed invoices. Greg, you can see yours went down to 10. We'll just open this up. Here's the $10 invoice. And you know what? Let's make sure that phone number made it over. And if you look toward the right-hand side under phone 1, you can see the phone number that we entered in CRM is now listed right in GP. And, whoops, if we go back, if you look under the VIP column, you can see everyone is now a VIP, instead of some of you as VIPs and some not, okay? So just some changes that we made in Excel and pass that data over to GP. Now let me show you one more thing on the Excel side before we move into SmartConnect itself from a solution perspective. I want to show you an example of one of our data entry templates. Now we have a ton of different data entry templates, as I mentioned in the beginning. So this is just one example. This is our journal entry template where we've made these nice pretty templates for your users where you can do your data entry here and then pass that right back to GP. Now if you look at the top, you can see I have my header already completed with my batch ID and my transaction type as standard, my transaction date, and my source doc, my currency ID. But if I wanted to select another currency, I could select that from the drop-down list. And the same thing with my company. If I wanted to select another company, I could go ahead and do so from the drop-down. Now, I can see I've got my common debits and credits already listed out, but if I take a look at the top, I can see my total isn't quite balanced. So let me just fix that real quick. We'll make sure to pass in a balanced journal entry. And I have my common accounts listed out. And if I wanted to, I could select another account number from this drop-down list, and you can see it's going to change that account name for me, and vice versa. If I change the account name, it'll change the account number. Now, one quick note on this, because I do get some questions when we talk about this in demos. In this case, where those account numbers and account names are pulling from are actually some hidden sheets that are some static sheets within this Excel file. Now, I do have some customers that want to pull that dynamic data from GP and always have the latest list, in this case, of account numbers and account names, and you certainly can do that. We just have those static sheets for this demo. Now let's add a few distribution references. On the right-hand side, we'll just say Kim and Greg and John, and I'll put my name here, and wire fees. So I've added those distributions, and now what I'm going to do is I'm going to hit submit right in the middle. Now that submit button that I just selected acts much the same as the Excel add-in button. The only difference with the templates is when you're dealing with those submit buttons, we put a little bit of VBA behind them. So in this case, like for this journal entry, I'm making sure to pass in a balanced journal entry. So that VBA is checking to make sure it's balanced. All right, let's jump into GP and into the financials module, and let's take a look at our latest journal entry. All right, perfect. So here I can see at the top right, my batch ID of monthly. I have my monthly reference right in the middle. My balanced debits and credits, 211, 80811. And if I take a look at some of these lines here, I can see my distribution references with fleet vehicle insurance, Kim, Greg, John, my name, and the wire fees. So I wouldn't even have to have my individuals logged into GP, those users. They can just go ahead and submit that via the template. Now, I have had a number of customers that say, okay, well, Abby, when you're showing me these Excel files and these Excel integrations, you're just doing single transactions. Can you guys handle bulk integrations? And the answer is absolutely. We have a ton of customers that are actually passing in a huge number of records into GP. If you're using something like our pre-configured data entry templates, you're going to want to tweak those in order to use those. And a lot of times our customers will do things like use our template builder that you can find within the product and actually build your own template, or start with a current Excel file that you're using, make sure it's configured to be used as the data source, and then go ahead and you can either pass that in with the Excel add-in. You can certainly call that. You could drop it into a folder and we can watch that folder, and once that new file is in there, it can go ahead and and we can schedule that integration in. So keep in mind, the sky's the limit beyond what I have shared with you here, okay? Now, let's look at the product. So I've just opened up SmartConnect, and SmartConnect is accessed outside of GP and outside of CRM. So what that means is that you don't have to take up a user license in order to add or to edit any of the integrations. Now, let's just take a look around real quick here. At the very top, you can see that so far I'm looking at my maps. If I want to, I can also review my real-time data sources. So if I wanted to see what do I have set up for my GP real-time data sources, I can go ahead and do so and take a look at those. I can also see which maps I have scheduled out. So do I want to see the map that I know is scheduled out, when it's going to run next, when it was last successful, when it last failed, I can go ahead and quickly do so. If I have my error log turned on, which I would highly recommend, I can go ahead and take a look at any of the maps that may have had an error, and I can actually hover over here and see what that error was, identify that issue, and if I want to, I can even resubmit that selected tenant, in this case, right from within SmartConnect. Now, one thing to note is that security is under your setup tab, and your SmartConnect security is based on your Active Directory user. So what that means is that you can actually give your users access to specific maps you'd like them to see, down to specific connectors and permissions within those maps. So let's say you have someone where you just want them to have access to see the name of the map and hit run. Maybe it's a kind of a one-off map. You can go ahead and do so, all the way up to your super users who can do absolutely everything and anything. And we personally use SmartConnect in-house, and we have scenarios like that where we have people who we want them to be able to edit the maps and import and export them, and we have others who we don't want them to really touch them or have access to do anything, and you can really define out that security. Now let's go ahead and let's take a look at the map that corresponds with the very first integration we saw, where you actually entered your data in the web form, then we had that, that flow over to GP to create those invoices and those customers. So we have the ID and the description completed at the top. The next thing we want to do is we want to select our data source. Now we have 3 different data source types available. We have our bulk data load, changes only, and real-time events. So likely you'll start within the bulk data load section, but you'll definitely use the other 2 types as well, especially as you dive into the product a little more. So probably those of you who are on the call already that own SmartConnect are utilizing some of these data sources, where you're pulling from places like Excel files or multi-data sources, or your ODBC connections, or your queries, maybe a REST service. That's where you would pull that data from. Now, changes only is really, really helpful. And what we do there is we essentially track any of the changes that are made in GP to a changes only table, and we utilize that table to run integrations on a scheduled basis. So let's say maybe you have 5 or 6 different companies in GP, and maybe you have one that really acts as the parent company, but you want any of the changes that are made in that parent company, maybe on accounts or contacts, maybe you want that to go ahead and flow to the other companies. What you can do is you can set up a changes only map, and if you're okay with that flowing maybe once a day or twice a day, you could actually just schedule that out rather than having that constant real-time integration going. I've also had customers who do changes only between GP and CRM, or between their ERP and their CRM system, just because they are fine with that scheduled out data movement. Now, real-time events you actually saw today when we entered the information, when we entered Greg's address right in GP and we hit save, and we saw how it was added right away to that CRM account. That was a real-time event. So that's based on our GP, CRM, or SQL real-time triggers. Another example of using a real-time event would be things like maybe you have maybe you're like us, where you have orders come in on your website and you have the paid invoices created right in GP, but maybe based on a line item that's in that paid invoice, maybe you know that there's a service call that needs to be created, or a project that needs to be created in project accounting. Well, you have all of that data already in GP. Why re-key it in when you can just have a real-time map run on the back side of that and create that, that field service call or that project? So my rule of thumb for people there with real-time events, it's kind of my tip of the day. Think about the areas in GP or in CRM where your users might be doing duplicate data entry. That is oftentimes a place where you can just plug in a SmartConnect map, you can cut out that data entry, and you can make your team a lot more efficient, okay? Now, once you select your data source type and your data source, your settings below are going to look a little bit different depending on what you've defined. Now, here you can see we're going to pull from multi-data sources, and if I wanted to, I can even utilize my SmartConnect query builder. So if I wanted to drag and drop my tables over from the right-hand side and link them together, I can. I can define my output down at the bottom or my criteria. And if I look at the top left-hand side, I can even write my query here if I choose to. Now, moving toward the destination option, that's the next thing you're going to define. So you're going to say, where do I want to send this data to? So today we're focused in on GP, but just a reminder, you can export to files or write to CRM or NAV or SQL or a REST service. And depending on what you define with your destination, your settings are going to change again, okay? Now, since we're writing to GP for this map, we are working with our groups and our node types. So you can really think of groups as modules in GP. So out of the box, we can integrate with AA, bank rec, fixed asset, GL, HR, SOP, POP, payables, receivables, and you can take a look on through that list. Now, let's say you're looking at this list, this group list, and you're thinking, hey, you know, the module that I want to integrate to is not listed here. Does that mean SmartConnect is not going to work for me? And the answer is no, it does not. What it means is that you may need to just add on a small piece to SmartConnect called Node Builder, which allows you to create the custom integration points that you need. So maybe there's a third party that sits in GP and they haven't written any what we call eConnect nodes or integration points for their product. You can certainly add on Node Builder and do that. And I will say, just a side note, I would say probably the vast majority, maybe 95% of my customers have never had a need for Node Builder. They've had all of the integration points they need right out of the box, maybe even a higher percentage than that. So if you're wondering, just reach out to me or reach out to the BMI team about integration points, and we can certainly just make sure yes or no they're there or what you would need to do. All right, so today we're saying we want to write to our sales order processing group and we want to work with our sales orders as our node type. So listed below are my available nodes. So if I wanted to, I could create or update the item, create or update the customer, add the line item, on through the list here. So let's take a look at creating a sales transaction. Now on the left-hand side, you're going to see our source columns where we're pulling that data from, and on the right-hand side, you're going to see our destination columns. So let's say I wanted to map from a source field to a destination field. I can just drag and drop from the left to the right. Now on the right-hand side, you'll notice that a few of these fields are listed in red, and that means that these are absolutely required in order to create the type of transaction you're asking it to create. So you absolutely need to map, in this case, the sales doc type, the doc ID, doc number, etc. Okay? Actually, if you started mapping some of these out and you didn't map all of the required fields and then you tried to hit save, you get an error basically saying, hey, you're missing some fields, go back and map them. Now, if I can draw your attention toward the right-hand side, we're going to focus underneath the column type on the right. And you can see for some of those first destination fields there, I actually didn't even use a source column or a source field. For example, with the sales doc type, I chose to use a list option. And now, since I have business logic that's sitting right underneath SmartConnect, and the business logic that we use for our integrations is eConnect, so we're using all those business rules. Since I have those business rules already in place, SmartConnect knows that when I've selected list option for my sales doc type, it's going to give me my choices of back orders, fulfillment orders, invoices, orders, quotes, or returns. Okay, so that's what it's going to give me. Now, if I wanted to, for other fields, I could do things like add in local constants or global constants. I could do things like add in rolling columns. So when you see the rolling column, what we're doing there is we're grabbing the next document number. I could do translation tables or calculated fields. So that brings us back to that transform section that we talked about in the beginning, where we really want to make the integration work for your specific need. Now let's say you wanted to do something like add in a calculated field. You can move up to additional columns and drop into, let's say, calculations here. And this is where you can add some VB.NET or C# scripting. So if you want to manipulate some data, like maybe you want to manipulate a batch ID or a date format or something like that, you can go ahead and add a small script here. Now, you can also utilize some of the helpers on the left-hand side. So if you want to drag and drop in your source column or your functions, maybe I want to concatenate a few fields. Maybe I want to concatenate, we'll say, my first and my last name. I can go ahead and utilize that functionality, and it's going to build out that script for me. Okay, so I don't have to be, you know, someone that can code everything and anything. I can actually use some of those helpers, and we also have some predefined scripts that you can load up as well. All right, we're getting towards the tail end here. Just a couple more things to point out to you. If you want to have this integration run in multiple companies, you can select the company name on the right-hand side. You can also define where the information is going per company. So maybe based on some information in your data source, maybe you want the first 20 lines to go to company A and the next 20 lines to go to company B. You can go ahead and add that definition here. Again, that would be VB.NET or C# scripting that you would use. Now that language, the scripting language, as you'll see in a moment, is defined per map. Okay. Now, today you saw how we wrote to our SOP extras window, that extender window. So if you're using extender already, you can actually utilize those extender fields as a data source or a destination. So if you're using them as the destination and you want to add another extender object, you can just go ahead and follow the prompts to add the object. So let's say I have an extender form I want to add, and maybe it's my add update form. And let's just select this one I already have completed, my subscriptions. And then I can even change my display name if I want to. So we'll just say that we'll change this display name to Thursday just for the sake of fun. We'll go ahead and hit save there. And if I scroll down to the bottom, now you can see I have this node or this integration point available to write to if I want to. Now underneath my options tab, this is where I'm going to find my error log. So I can choose to log my errors or my successes. I can also choose my scripting language as well. And tasks, now this happens to be one of my favorite things. If you're already utilizing SmartConnect and you're not using tasks, you're going to want to check this out. It's going to really help make your life a whole lot easier, I think. But what you can do with our tasks is you can have these tasks run before the map runs. You can have them run after the map runs based on a successful or a failed integration. You can have them run on individual documents as well. So you can start doing things around archiving. So maybe you want to copy, delete, or move some files. You could run a script. So maybe you want to do a script prior to the map even running. Maybe you want to run a map. So if you're like one of my customers, I've got a customer in Louisiana that actually chains a bunch of maps together utilizing these tasks. So based on one running successfully, they then run another integration and another and another. You can do things like something that we do, and Blue Cross Blue Shield, they're a customer of ours. They use this as well. You could do our send email option. So maybe based on the integration failing, maybe you want to go ahead and make sure to return that global error. You want to send it to a defined group so they're able to address that error right away. And you want to give them the subject, hey, something bad happened, go fix it. maybe you want to change that just a little bit. But what happens is, as you are making these integrations really efficient, you're staying hands-off, maybe you're doing external calls, you're doing scheduling, maybe one concern is, hey, how am I going to know if something goes wrong? Well, go ahead and set up a task and make sure that someone is notified if there was an error in the integration, but they don't have to sit and stare at the screen and say, okay, my data is moving. All right? And last but not least, scheduling. So if you'd like to schedule your integrations out, you can do so, and you can schedule them to run daily, weekly, monthly, every minute of every hour of every day. So once you define the map setup that we just walked through, and then you define your scheduler here, if you're ready to go with that integration, you can go ahead and hit run, and that integration is going to run based on the defined schedule. All right, so I know I've done a lot of talking, but let's just review real quick. We all worked together, we entered some information on a web form, and today we saw how from the web form we created data in GP. So we created invoices, customer cards, wrote to a third-party window. On the CRM side, we added to a marketing list. We created accounts and contacts. We saw data passing back and forth between the two systems. We looked at multiple Excel entries in, and then we walked together through the actual process of setting up your own integration. All right. Well, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and mention a couple things, some training options. Reach out to the BMI team for training. We have a wide variety of training options as well, everything from boot camps to online training, but I know the BMI team is highly equipped as well. So reach out to them for some training, especially if you're thinking to yourself right now, hey, this looks easy. I want to do this on my own. Just if you could just trust me, make sure to get some training under your belt. That's going to help you to be a lot more successful right out of the gate. And we have a number of different boot camp options you can certainly take a look at. You can see those on our site as well. All right, well, this is me, so you know who you're talking to, and I've shared my contact information, but what I'd love to do is just take any questions that might have come in, and if you feel more comfortable asking those questions via email or over the phone, don't hesitate to reach out to me, but I'm ready to go with questions.
Excellent. Thank you, Abby. And I should also mention that I'm trying to do a new exercise here. On the right-hand side, you'll see a handouts area. And I did upload Abby's deck. And so if you wanted to print that out so you got her information, there you go. All right, so on the right-hand side, type in any questions that you would like to get answers on. Here is our first one. For the Excel add-in, does user have to have the SmartConnect installed on the workstation, or does it require for that user to have the account in SmartConnect?
That is a great question. They would need to, if they're using the Excel add-in to actually push the integration, they would need to have SmartConnect installed on their machine, on their actual client, yes. Okay. Now, technically with the Excel add-in, we're talking about GP users then in that case as well, where we're talking about, use those templates and then have those users pass that data over to GP, and it wouldn't have to take up a login. From an audit trail perspective, once that user hits submit from that Excel file, what's being tracked is actually the eConnect user. So what I've had some customers do is they've added another field, let's say they're using some of those templates or an Excel file, where they write the Active Directory user over to GP as well, just so they can have that from an audit perspective. So just depends on what your requirements are, but yes.
All right, here's another question. How can we download the GL entry templates? Are there other templates?
Yeah, that's a great question, actually. Let me just show you real quick where those are so you're familiar. Go to our website, eonesolutions.com. On the top right-hand side, you'll see a download section. Now, the download section is divided out by product. So you'll want to go into SmartConnect, and we have a little shortcut to the templates. Now, a couple things to note. The Excel data entry templates, would be listed here under our SmartConnect Excel to Dynamics GP templates. So you can download all of those. The sample maps that I mentioned as well, some of those sample map templates, you can either download them right from our site, or within the product itself, you can actually choose to import. There's an option through the menus to choose to actually import those templates. So you have two different ways there.
That might be answering Rod's question here as well. Would you be willing to share copies of those Excel files?
Yep, absolutely. So you can, all of what I've used on the demo today, you can get from our site here from the download section. You are also welcome to check out the sandbox, which is what we use for our demos, which is just eonesolutions.com/sandbox. And you're not going to break anything at all. It resets once you're done. You get, I think, 4 to 8 hours of uninterrupted time, but you can see all the templates there. You can see any of the maps that we have set up. So you can certainly grab them from there, but you can also grab them right from our site. That's just as easy.
You guys got one of the best sandboxes out there. That is excellent. All right,
Thank you.
Rod asked the questions, will there be a cloud version of SmartConnect someday? That
is a great question. Absolutely. So our developers are working fast and furiously on that. We do have a web client version available right now. There still has to be an on-premise install. At present, what that does is that would allow you to see any maps that are set up that your user has access to and the maps that are run. You can't actually create a map there. What we will be doing within the next probably quarter or so is the aim, is we'll have a fully hosted version of SmartConnect where we actually host it, but you're just going to log in online. You can set up the maps that you need. You can run them from there, and you can see a nice, pretty dashboard. So I actually had a meeting with my team on that just this week. So it's progressing really well. Should be out very soon.
Nice. I'll just assume that that means upgrades and things like that would all be taken care of too.
Yeah, one of the reasons that it's that we haven't released it yet is because we don't want the current customers who have SmartConnect to have to move to a separate product. There are other integration solutions out there that keep the two products completely separate from on-premise to a cloud-based version. And our goal is that if you're on-premise and then you do want to go to a cloud-based version, that from an upgrade perspective, you can just upgrade and have the maps flow over versus having to start brand new and not have those products talk to each other. So that's one of the reasons that we're making sure it's all in place so that upgrades are smooth.
Excellent. All right, I have a question. If I am using a SmartConnect to import monthly trial balances in GP for one of the companies, if someone has to run the integration twice by accident, will it create the duplicate entries with the integration error out to indicate that the transaction already exists?
That is an excellent question. Why don't I take that one offline and pull in one of my, I'll just run it past my consultant just to make sure that it's going to work properly and that you're not going to get those duplicate transactions, but let me run it past my tech guys to give you a good answer.
Okay. Another question is this integrate with Winsoft's job cost?
Winsoft does have integration nodes that they've created. So what you want to do is you want to reach out to them to get those nodes or those integration points. I do believe that they sell them separately, so you want to see which ones they've created and what they sell them at. I believe we have job cost, but I don't have their list of integration points, but they should be able to give you that really quickly. We have a ton of Winsoft customers utilizing SmartConnect.
Excellent. All right. This is a toughie question here from John. John, you're smart. It says, can eConnect integrate with the NoSQL database such as MongoDB?
Well, that is above my head. I'm not sure. I will take that one and ask my consultant as well.
All right.
So that's an excellent question. I don't know if you can send me those two, Kim,
You
and
bet.
I'll get the answers.
You bet, you bet. All right, and then John follows up is, what is the cost? So I will mention that eOne's website is phenomenal, and it does have a shopping cart with information. We do encourage you to work with us as we're one of their top partners, and there's times that we can help financially on that end of it as well, John. So do get in touch with your account manager, and if you don't know who that is, you can get a hold of me, kim.peterson@InterDyn BMI, and I'll get someone there to help you. All right, let's see here. Oh, someone just said, I'm sorry, I put eConnect instead of SmartConnect. I do that all the time myself, John. All right, everybody. Sounds great. That's the list of questions. Abby, anything else that you want to add?
I don't think so. I've just shared my contact information one more time. Like I said in the beginning, don't hesitate to reach out to me, to Kim. We're here just to make sure you get all your questions answered. So otherwise, thank you so much for your time this morning, and I look